Welcome to PMI Manitoba's podcast series, Keeping It Real, where we talk about real stories, project insights, and community success. Watch our episode 3, From Projects to Purpose, with our special guest, Kathy Schwalbe, owner of Schwalbe Publishing, hosted by our news desk team member, Sheila Ramirez. So let's dive into it.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is listening and watching this interview session with Kathy Schwalbe. Kathy is an author of many different project management books and also part of the academe at Osberg College in 2015. I'd like to welcome you, everybody.
Hello, my name is Kathy Schwalbe. I'm looking forward to this interview, and they came up with some great questions, so hopefully I'll come up with some great answers as well.
Your career has spanned the military, private industry, academia, and publishing. What initially drew you to project management, and how did your early experiences shape your approach to leadership?
I was project manager day one out of college. I was in the Air Force, so I went to college on an Air Force ROTC scholarship. And initially I was in engineering, switched to mathematics, but the Air Force kind of decides based on your background and their needs where they're going to put you. And fortunately, I was based out in the Boston area, Hanscom Air Force Base. And my title was project officer day one. So here I was, 22 years old, didn't really know what project management was, didn't know anything about all the satellites and communication systems that we were working on, but I was put in charge of a research project day one. So it was a lot of learning involved. And I guess prior to that, well, I'm number 3 of 7 children. So you kind of have to learn to negotiate and get along with other people. I have 4 brothers. Oldest child is a brother, so grew up doing a lot of sports. And I do think that the sports also helped me in my career. So I was involved in a lot of sports, but especially soccer. Started playing soccer when I was 12. And at Notre Dame, they didn't have many women's sports when I went there, but they had flag football. So I did play flag football. But then I started recruiting women to start soccer. So I used my skills in sports and I guess took on some leadership roles there. So helped start that up. Let's see, what was the next one? So after the Air Force, well, I was on the research projects, and then I kind of wanted to do something that where you could see what was happening. You know, the research was all far out. So there was a new project on base to automate 15 Air Force bases. And again, this was in the mid 80s, early 80s, mid 80s. So there wasn't much for computers, personal computers were just coming out, but I wanted to get on that project. So that's how I learned a lot about IT. And it was a $250 million project. I was not in charge of that, but I was in charge of the economic analysis and the integration. And the Air Force, they really do put you in charge. At first, it's a small project. They see how you do. Then you get on something bigger and bigger. So I just had a lot of opportunities there. When I did leave the Air Force, I went to what's now Boeing, McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis, and that was quite a change. So, I had only worked 5 years in the Air Force, was used to being in charge, but then you go to a big corporation, they're not going to let a 27-year-old manage huge projects. So I was on project teams, and it was fine. I did work my way up, and then they went through a restructuring. So I did get a senior consulting role within the company, and it was a lot of IT projects helping the company decide what to do. So then I was in more a strategic role. And then I got into independent consulting because there were 7 rounds of layoff, kind of like the economy now. And even though I had moved up and done very well, I was put on a layoff list. We had just bought a new house, had 2 kids. My husband was in academia. I was the main breadwinner, so I couldn't not work. But luckily, I got an independent consulting job at an oil company. And that I always told my students that's how I could afford to go into academia, because I was getting paid pretty well. And I was there for, I think, 7 months and just really enjoyed that. They had a lot of money, but we're way behind in technology. So I spent more money in those 7 months than all the rest of my career. So that was really a great experience.
That's actually really inspiring. I didn't know. And for that, kudos to you, Kathy, for the what you've been through. And for you and for a lot of people to be reading, your books, you guiding people on their project management practice. That's really something that is inspiring, not just for me, but I'm sure for a lot of people who will be reading or watching this interview. You made the shift from hands-on project roles into teaching and then authorship. Was there a defining moment when you realized your true passion was in educating the next generation of project managers?
And they're kind of interesting story as well. When I was at McDonnell Douglas Boeing, they had a unique approach to training their employees. It was called the VIP program, Voluntary Improvement Program, and it was after hours. All the classes were taught by employees. You didn't have to pay to take the classes, but I had shifted, and this was before I got into the strategic consulting role, but I was in engineering, and then I moved into human resources, IT, and the human resources group was in charge of the training. So one of the people just asked if I'd be interested in teaching some of their computer courses, and it paid really well, and it was after work. And so that's how I first got into teaching. And I enjoyed it. And then, to be honest, the main reason I went into academia, I told you I was laid off. Then I did do the independent consulting, which I loved, but it's very risky, a lot of hours, and longer hours. And we had 2 kids, and we were ready to make a change. And my husband had been in academia. And honestly, I envied the lifestyle. You teach 2-3 days a week. You've got long breaks. You've got summer off. Yes, you need to do research and publish, but I like that. Especially my first job was a big research project. And I never had trouble with writing. Thankfully, I had great teachers in high school. So to me, any course in college where you had to write was an easy A. So I'm one of the few people that liked math and science, but I could write. So I was looking for a different job. My husband was looking for a different job. And I just saw a little ad in the paper for MIS faculty and applied, and they hired me with just a master's degree over 2 PhDs because I had 10 years experience. And then I had to get my PhD part-time. So as I was a full-time assistant professor, I was working on my doctorate part-time. But the teaching to me, and I have to be careful when I say this because I wasn't in academia right away, but to me, it was much easier than being in the military or in industry. And because, you don't have the pressure of a boss and the customers and a little bit of pressure from students, but if you know how to deal with people and realize that your job is really to help students learn and help them in their careers, you get a good relationship with students. So I guess I like the environment, I like the hours, I like the mentoring. The writing kind of came by accident. I think you have a question on that later, so I'll save that for later, but it's been a great shift for me. I never thought I would go into education, but I enjoyed it, and hopefully, a lot of people have benefited from my work.
Well, you've spent much of your career in traditionally male-dominated environments, from the Air Force to tech to academia. What were some of the challenges you faced, and how did you navigate them, especially while balancing work and family life?
Well, I'll start again early on with soccer. So in high school, actually my 8th grade science teacher was the soccer coach, and I had started playing soccer when I was 12, and I'd always tease him, when are you going to let me try out for the team? And then Title IX came about, so if a school didn't have a girls' sport and it was a non-contact sport, they had to let girls try out and participate in those teams. So my junior year of high school is when Title IX came out, and it was right before the season started. But there were 5 girls tried out for the boys soccer team. 2 of us made it. I got to start on the junior varsity. I had 4 brothers. I love sports. I really enjoyed playing soccer with the guys, and also a pretty competitive person. Besides sports and academia, I remember a lot of my science and math teachers were men, and they often would have competition. A girl at the board, a boy at the board, try to figure out a problem the fastest. So I just liked competing, so I was kind of used to working with men. When I went to college, actually back then, I went to University of Notre Dame, and they restricted the number of women that could attend. So they had a limit that you couldn't have more than 25% women. So there were more men at college, which was fine. I didn't mind that at all. And then when I started working, I was actually only the 2nd female officer in my group at Hanscom Air Force Base of like 100 officers. And the other woman, we still stay in touch. She was just a year older than me. So we were kind of breaking ground there. When I went to McDonnell Douglas, I was in an engineering group of probably about 100 people. Again, I was only the 2nd female engineer. The other woman was just a year older than me. So we were breaking ground. As I worked more, you started seeing more women in the field, but I just kind of, sure, you had to prove yourself sometimes, but I never took things personally and have sort of a good sense of humor. So if somebody would throw something at me, instead of getting angry or whatever, I'd just slam it right back at them, because I was used to that with my brothers and guys on the soccer team and things. But I did get a lot of good advice from other men. When I was getting my master's degree, I was in the Air Force and got pregnant. I was married, was not planning to have kids right away, but I was gonna quit. I'm like, this is too much. I can't work and get this master's degree. You know, it'd be too much. But one of the men that sat next to me in class said, do it now. It's just gonna get harder as the kids get older. And same thing, one of the men I worked with said, do it now. So, you know, I got good advice from them, and they would just say, you just have to be there. Men just have to get used to women in the workforce. So, I mean, I just sure had some issues. One incident I remember when I was in the Air Force, I was wearing a skirt. You wear a uniform, but I was wearing a skirt. We're at a big meeting, about 50 people. This older contractor was presenting something, and he had handouts, paper handouts, and he didn't have enough. But I remember he specifically walked up to me and gave me a handout, and he said, well, I have to give you one because you have the best legs in the room. And I didn't say anything, but my boss's boss was sitting next to me, and he stood up and he said, can I see you in the hallway? And he took this guy out in the hallway right before he was going to present and just chewed him out. He's like, you do not speak to an officer like that. And he told me later what he did. So I thought that was pretty nice. I would have let it go, no big deal. But so there are a lot of good people out there, a lot of good men, a lot of good women. But I mean, you just have to help each other out as you're breaking new ground.
That's very true, especially nowadays. But I think that barrier has already transformed, especially in the recent times. You know, there's already a balance between women and gender equality. So that is good.
I was going to mention also in academia, I was in the business department. And I think when I went to Augsburg, it was in 1991, we had, I think, 12 or 13 professors. I was the 3rd woman, but I was the first woman to become a full professor in the business department, which I thought was unusual too. But if you look at academia, it is still predominantly men are the full professors, the presidents, provosts, whatever. So, I mean, I think women just have to hang in there, but I will give a plug also for starting your own business. And I remember when I was 15, I went on a trip with my older sister to California, and my one uncle had his own construction business, and he's like, that's the way to make it in America. You have to start your own company. Had always wanted to do that and never thought it would be publishing, but I started self-publishing in 2009. It was great. So you don't have to worry about any discrimination or whatever. You're the one in charge. So that's something to consider for people too. And project management definitely gives you a lot of the skills that you need to be an entrepreneur.
I very much agree with that. Like, if you are a project manager, you should definitely have that kind of mentality and that kind of strength to be able to pull through whatever life takes you. So that's great. Now that we go towards navigating industry evolution, your books have guided hundreds of thousands of students and professionals, including me. How have you seen the discipline of project management evolve over the decades, from the early 2000s to the present?
The biggest change I see, and like I said, I was Air Force project management and was very structured. So the biggest change I'd say now is that things move a lot faster. You don't have that hierarchy that you used to have. You just have to be more collaborative with other people. You know, you're not the authoritative style where you just say, this is what we're going to do. You have to collaborate more. The technology definitely has changed. So the communications, a lot more transparency to see what's happening. So you just have to be more flexible, more agile, definitely communicate, use the skills of your team members. I mean, but honestly, I did try to do that early on, because I was put in that role and I didn't know much. But I also admitted when I didn't know much, and I did that in a lot of roles as I moved on to different areas. So you have to pick other people's brains, figure out who's best at what. And the project manager really is the orchestrator, even more so now. You're the orchestrator. But some things are more difficult, but some are easier. And with the technology now, you can reach out to people all over the world for advice. You're not just dependent on people in the room with you, because the projects used to be that everybody was in the room together. So it's definitely changed, and that is the one constant in project management is change. So if you want to go into it, you have to enjoy that type of lifestyle. I know a lot of people do not. They don't want to have to change all the time. But especially that's what I think is happening as technology changes, projects change, the world changes. So you just have to be quicker and figure out the best way to go. But the emphasis is still on doing what the organization needs with your projects. So you have to keep that in mind all the time.
I agree with you. Flexibility, and also the only constant thing in the world is change. It's cliche, but it's true. So AI, data analytics, and hybrid methodologies are reshaping how projects are delivered. What excites you the most about these developments, and where do you see potential pitfalls?
Yeah, I think the main benefits are letting the technology do some of that menial work. Like, I've listened to a lot of podcasts and things about AI, especially because in my last edition, the big change was more agile. The next edition, I'm going to have more on AI. But I actually got a certificate in AI back in 1990 from Washington University. And it was a difficult certificate to get. You had to go to classes. I had to program in Lisp. I wrote expert systems. So AI has been around, but now the generative AI is pretty new. And I think that's what's changing things the most. But like any new technology, you have to figure out where does it help you do your job and where does it benefit society. I'll talk about later, one of the last questions. I used AI to help me answer the questions, so I'll tell you about some of the pitfalls with that as well. Benefits, doing the menial work so you can focus on the hard things, the decision making, but the pitfalls are getting bad information, wasting your time, chasing the technology instead of trying to focus on what you really need to get done.
How about with the decision making and leadership? Having trained countless students, what do you believe separates a good project manager from a great one?
And to me, you have to want to lead the project. I know a lot of people are put into that role, but you have to realize it does matter that you are in that role. Like my first job in the Air Force, my boss was terrible. So I think when you see someone in a role that does a bad job, even though you don't want to step up, like I was pretty quiet, shy, more technical, didn't really want to be in charge of people. But if you see the person in that role, they have a big impact on the project. And if they're doing a terrible job, it's going to affect everybody. So it's like, well, I can do better than that. So you have to, even if you didn't initially want to be a project manager, you have to accept it and realize how important that role is. I also think it's really key to get on projects that you're passionate about. I've been in charge of some projects I wasn't crazy about, but that's the nice thing too. The projects end, you move on to the next one. And my big incentive, especially when I was working, was you knew if you did a good job, you could have a say in what your next project was. So I'd want to get on something that I really wanted to be passionate about. So I think that's what separates the great leaders. You understand how important the role is and you're passionate about the projects.
I agree. I believe empathy is one of the most important aspects of being a great project manager. You just don't do it, but you understand and how it is to be in the shoes of another person under your belt or who is someone above you. Thanks for sharing that, Kathy. Can you share a time in your career when you had to make a tough decision that went against the grain, but ended up being the right call?
Well, the incident that stands out to me, so when I left McDonnell Douglas Boeing, was an independent consultant. I was hired by the head of IT for an oil company, and they actually were going through a lot of changes. Environmental Protection Agency changed rules on gasoline to make it better for the environment. So they had to upgrade 3 oil refineries. So they hired a new vice president. So he was in charge of upgrading these refineries. I was a IT consultant for them. So they asked me to work with this new vice president, figure out what project management software they needed, all of his IT needs. And I recommended something that was not their standard. They had standards in the IT department, and this head of IT was very into following the standards, even on the operating system. And again, this dates me, but they used OS2. I don't know if you ever even heard of that, but it was Windows and there was Macintosh was out. Hewlett Packard even had an operating system for a while, but this was an IBM operating system. And they did use Excel and Word, but this VP, the project management software, there wasn't much out there. But he also wanted to use Lotus instead of Excel. And I'm like, fine. But I made all these IT recommendations. None of them were standard. And my boss was really mad. He actually yelled at me. So I had to go in once a week and have him sign my invoice to get paid. So I went in, and before I said anything, he just starts yelling at me. And I never had anybody yell at me like that, So I just took it, and I just left the room, had to get it signed by the end of the day. So went back in a couple hours later, and he did sign it, and he didn't yell at me again. He didn't totally apologize, but he was really, really upset. But I knew my recommendations were what was needed for this new vice president to do his job. To me, it's like it was the right call, even though he didn't like it. So
that's amazing. I will also have a lot of experiences with my previous bosses, even now. But I believe it depends on those higher ups to understand you and sit down with you, talk about it. I went to Qatar for a few years, and I believe I also got yelled at many times in there. I believe it's a culture, and more than anything, I believe it's the person itself. So that's how it goes, right? But as project managers and as women and as humans in general, we just have to stand up for ourselves. If we need to make the right call, we just have to be brave about it. So thanks for that, Kathy. How do you personally approach decision making when faced with uncertainty or conflicting data?
And I do a lot of research, try not to overthink things, but I will, do my homework. I will definitely get opinions of other people whose opinions that I trust. And then you just have to go with your gut, and make the decision. And then, if it's not right, you have to be able to change it. But you can't wait forever, and you can't just go willy-nilly. So I think you have to do your homework, ask some other people, go for it, and then if you need to change it up, then just change it up.
Okay, now let's go to your teaching, writing, and thought leadership. You've authored some of the most widely used textbooks in the project management space. What's your process like when translating complex topics into accessible student-friendly content?
I'll start with the reason I started writing books to begin with. You've heard the term necessity is the mother of invention. So I didn't teach the first project management class at Augsburg. And when you introduce a new class in academia, you have to offer it as an elective, see if it gets popular, and then you have to go through a board, get it be part of the curriculum. But we had an adjunct who actually taught the first project management class, and he was a project manager at IBM. We had a big adult program on the weekends, so he taught it on the weekends, but he didn't use a book at all. He just made some slides based off of his own experience. So he taught a couple of sections, and it was very popular. So then I was asked to teach it to our traditional students. And we had it was mostly juniors, seniors would take a project management course. So I was looking at books because you need more structure if you're in a semester-long traditional course. There was not much out there at all. The PMBOK was out there, but it was very short and just a bunch of definitions that I'm like, that's not going to help anybody. The main book out there, and I won't name the name, but it was over 1,000 pages long, very dry. All the project examples were big and old. And I'm like, that's not going to excite students. But I did find another book. I don't remember the author. And I used it, and the class went fine, but I just used the parts of the book that made sense. And I always, from day one, I had students give presentations and I had them do team projects. Because I'm like, how can you learn about project management if you don't apply it on a project? And that approach worked very well. So the class got popular, and another adjunct was teaching it, and he said, we should write a book together. There's really a need for a good book on project management. And I had just finished my PhD, and I was teaching a summer class, but I had like 2 weeks. So I'm like, okay, I'll put together a prospectus. And I didn't know what a prospectus was, but if you want to write a book, you need to put together a prospectus. I sent it to 3 or 4 different publishers, including PMI, and one got back to me, and they were interested. So I wrote the book, my first book, the IT project management book. I think I had started in 1998, was not on sabbatical, still teaching, had all 3 kids at the time, and finished the book on time. And I remember my editor, she probably spent as much time as I did. They gave me a development editor. That was the one big plus. The company I went with paid for the development editor. I mean, I got an advance, but you never know if a book's going to be published or if you're going to make any money on it. But I remember this editor said, I never edited a book that was done on time. And I'm like, well, it's on project management. If I can't do it, how can I write about it? So I thought so my approach was, it's another project, So I had a draft, the prospectus. You kind of draft the first 2 chapters and at least outline the rest of the book. But I knew right away, and I had used some books in other classes. I liked when they started with a scenario to kind of set the theme for the chapter, explain concepts, give a lot of real-world examples, and then refer back to the scenario. So I kind of used that approach I saw in other books. But, I never had writer's block. I would write. I think I was teaching Tuesday, Thursdays then. So the kids would get on the bus Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'd ride away. They'd come home. I'd be done. But this other aunt who wanted to write the book with me, he backed out pretty quickly because he was working full time, didn't have time to write. But I said, well, pick a chapter, any chapter, and I was going to have 12 chapters. So he picked the risk management chapter, which was, I think, chapter 11 in my first book. So I sent him drafts of the other chapters. So he knew the format, he knew well in advance when his chapter was done, and he kept putting off. Finally, he sends me like 5 pages on a Friday, and I had to have the first draft to the editor on Monday. So that was the one time I told my husband, take the kids to the farm. My husband grew up on a farm in Minnesota, and said, take the kids to the farm. I'm going to have to work all weekend. So I had to work all weekend. I did keep some of what he wrote was very good, but he had no references, no examples, none of the end of chapter material. But the reviewers, it was interesting. They could tell. So when you write a book, besides the editor, especially a textbook, you send it to about 5 professors who would hopefully use the book, and they provide feedback. But several of the reviewers could tell. They're like, it's like 2 people wrote this chapter. So they could tell his style versus my style. But the book was very successful, a lot more successful than the publisher thought. That was just a good experience for me. And then I wrote the introductory book after the dot-com bust in the early 2000s. You didn't have as many students wanting to study computer science and IT, and my first book was the IT project management. And I was seeing students from other disciplines interested in project management because it applies to everything. So I told my publisher, I said, I really would like to write a more introductory book. They agreed, so I wrote the introductory book and decided to use more the flow of a project, which I preferred more than the knowledge areas. And that one also was very successful. And that's the book that I started self-publishing after the publisher decided after 2 editions not to renew it because they had been bought and it didn't quite meet their threshold for numbers. The first year I self-published, the first thing I did was I made the website free. I really hated it when publishers would make students pay money to get to the website. And I was like, no, I made the website free. I dropped the price of the book substantially from what the publisher was charging. And I had 2 editions with them. And luckily I had gone to several conferences, knew a lot of their salespeople, and I had a market already. So all I did was I built the website and I just said, please let interested professors know there is a new edition. So I sold more copies that first year, just me, with no other staff really, than this huge publishing company did. So I thought that was pretty amazing, and I'm just glad it keeps selling. I keep thinking, oh, students aren't going to buy books anymore. It has shifted to more ebooks, but there's still a lot of students. And that's where, luckily project management, it does apply across all disciplines. So IT, I know, is having a big shakeup now, but you can use it in any aspect of your career and your life. So thankful there.
Has there ever been a feedback from a reader or student that deeply moved or surprised you?
I get a lot of feedback from students, and I really enjoy that. I actually have one student, and she was an adult student I had, I don't remember how many years ago, but we still keep in touch. I've invited her over to our lake house. She helped me write one of the case studies in the last edition. She's still an acting project manager, and we always sign our Christmas cards to my favorite student and to my favorite professor. So that's been a nice relationship. I was also going to mention one of the male students I had, again, a long time ago. I remember him saying, and he saw my background, ex-military, so he thought I was going to be super tough person, not that great a class, but I try to be more relaxed in class and, have students participate a lot. And he said, boy, you really surprised me, I thought you'd be a totally different teaching style. But I learned after the first semester I have everything in my syllabus. So I plan out the whole course, and a lot of students like that. So they know when exams are, they know when assignments are due. I never accepted late homework. That was a policy. I just hated that. So I zero for late homework, but I had a couple of extra credit assignments, which of course were more difficult than if the students had done the original homework. So I just learned, set it all out up front. So then in class, I don't have to deal with that stuff. We can focus on learning and not how many points is this? When is this due? Blah, 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 blah. That's laid out day one. So I think I used the structure and the military part in laying out the course, but in teaching the course, try to use the empathy and dealing with people, because that's project management. Yes, you need the structure, but a big part is dealing with people.
And what has the shift from professor to full-time or author or publisher taught you about discipline, creativity, or impact?
And there, the discipline, it is very different, especially now that I'm retired from teaching. And part of the reason I retired when I did was it did get to be too much. I was teaching a full load, had 3 different books. I had the IT one, the intro, and then the healthcare project management book. So I'd be like placing book orders between classes and trying to do book stuff. And it just got to be too much. And I was making good money from the books. And I just kind of decided I'd rather focus on the books. So I retired from teaching. But then, the schedule is totally different. And with the books, usually I do the updates every 4 years. I'm a little disappointed this time I have to wait 5 years because PMI hasn't released the new PMBOK yet. I try to wait for that. So I'm not doing one this fall, but will be one following fall. So I'm super busy, and I tell people, I'm really busy for like 6 months every 4 years because that's when I update the books. But then it's, just keeping up on the field, answering emails. I don't even really go to conferences much anymore. I'm just trying to enjoy retirement. So it's been great. Schedules, a lot easier. What else was it? The impact. And that's where too, if you have a book that reaches people throughout the world, you can have a lot of impact. So I decided to focus on that and enjoy my free time.
That's actually, for me, I hope someday I will be able to do that. I'm not really a teacher per se, but I'm an artist. So I have started freelancing before, but when I went to Canada, I had to go through the studies and then working. I'm trying to go back into it, and my director at PMI has been slowly helping me out as well. Kathy, I'm just really inspired with how you've managed to go through it, and then now that you've retired, you're just answering emails. You're still active, but not really active on the field, but at least you're just spending your time indoor, still taking care of your own business, but at least you have your own time for yourself.
Plenty of time for play competitive tennis now. I had to give up soccer, but I play tennis. So I was captain of the over 65 team last year in California. We go to Palm Springs area for the winter now, so that's been great too. Play a lot of golf, enjoy my grandson and the rest of my family. So you can't be a workaholic. And that's one thing my husband and I both, and he is still working, but we could shut off work. And I think that's really important. If you have a family, you have the time that you have to work, but when it's family time, it's family time. And that's gotten harder too with technology. I remember I did have a policy when students were always emailing and texting or whatever, but I said, I will not get back to you on Sundays. Just leave me alone on Sundays. So if you email me something, nope.
I think that's actually a great practice and discipline to be able to shut off during the weekends, especially. I must admit, I am still not doing that. I am trying to put that as a mindset, but as a practice, it's quite hard. So looking back, what has been the most rewarding moment of your career so far?
It was pretty special when I got the Educator of the Year award in 2011. So that was the Association of IT Professionals. So I got a nice plaque and So that was really special to me to be recognized like that. So that was the one that stood out for me.
And what advice would you give a young professional entering the project management field in 2025?
Well, I'd say I still think it's a great field. I think it's going to be around for a long time. As I said before, if you want to be a project manager, you have to enjoy change. You have to enjoy keeping up with the field. You have to be good at understanding people and developing people's talents. But I think it's a fantastic career field. I would warn you though, don't get so hung up on the technology. And I see that a lot now. They're using AI for this and that and blah, 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 blah. Focus on the value that whatever project you're doing will bring to the organization. So just use whatever technology adds to that value. And the people skills are becoming more and more important as the technology is doing more. So you have to focus on those people skills and don't be discouraged. Like I've gone through career changes. I was laid off. My book wasn't renewed. So view those as opportunities to take a risk and try something new. But I think it's a great career field.
Thank you for that. And lastly, if you had a chance to write one last chapter, not for a textbook, but a personal memoir, what would be the title and why?
And that's when I actually did a post on LinkedIn a few months ago because I've thought about that. And first it was going to be project management in retirement, project management in life. I still haven't decided. I took it as a compliment. My daughter years ago said, well, you should write a book on parenting, project management and parenting. And there are people that talk about that. But this is where I did use AI. So I put in a little prompt to help give me some titles. And I thought some of these were interesting, but these are some of the problems with using AI. I didn't care for too many of the titles. But here was one. Beyond the Gantt chart, lessons from a life built on projects. Pretty bad. No, I would never use Gantt chart in the title of anything. Driving the deliverables, a project management life. Again, I didn't care for that one. Here, how about this one? The critical path of my life, a project management memoir. No. And then this one takes the cake. I love PMI. I do follow PMBOK, but here was a title, The PMBOK of My Life, Lessons Learned and Unlearned. So I didn't care for any of those from AI, and I wasted at least an hour looking through those and trying different prompts. So none of them were really good. The one that wasn't bad was Making It Happen, Project Manager's Playbook for Life and Work. There are a few books with that title, Making It Happen. There's also a Mariah Carey song, I guess, and a TED Talk, so that's been taken. So the AI did not really help me in that department.
So you will have to go through a new list again, Kathy, sometime soon, but at least this is something that you would have to think about. Well, if you still have the time and you would still want to. So did that challenge you, that question?
It did. I have been thinking about that for a while. I do love writing. I did do a family history a few years ago. My dad turned 90, so I kind of pulled together a family history. I always said I wanted to write a movie, to write some fiction, but I've never really figured out what I'd want to do. At least now I have more time to watch good movies and shows and think about things. But at some point I would like to write something. Oh, one other title I did like, I'm in a couple of book clubs, but one of the last books I read was by Ina Garten, the chef. And I had never even seen her show. I heard of her, but she just came out a book and it was called Be Ready When the Luck Happens. So I kind of like that in that, and even in her life, yes, she got lucky and her career took off actually when she started writing books. She had her Barefoot Contessa shop, but when she wrote the books, that's when her life took off. But she had worked very hard, and that was kind of a luck thing that she did this book and it was successful, and then she did her TV show, it was successful, and she's still out there doing a lot of things. So if you work hard, and again, you frame your project, get the right people involved, focus on what's important, there's a little bit of luck involved, but you still have to have all those skills and that drive behind you to make things happen.
I believe every word you just said, Kathy. And yes, a little bit of luck will definitely help you, but more than that, it should be your mindset, your skill set that you have. And I believe every single day is learning and progress. Thank you so much, really. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with us? Any last words that you'd like to share?
To say thank you. And one thing I did want to manage as well when he asked about the writing process and making things understandable, I thought it was interesting. Like I said, my last edition, I focused on Agile. I had heard the term, I had some in it, especially more in my IT book, probably than the intro book before. But I read a lot on Agile. I had put a section on my website, to kind of test out some things. And I mean, I was amazed that, it kind of fluctuates, number one, but for someone who's been retired, but my book's been number one in Agile project management off and on since it came out. You just have to do your homework, but make it relatable. And I think that's what I've done. I try to not just throw out the buzzwords and be real about things. So I think that's, the gift that I have is being able to do that. So I hope I can do that with AI. That's going to be a challenge in the next edition. But like I said, it's been around for a while and people will figure out what to do with it. But again, figure out where it adds value and not in giving you a title for your memoir, obviously.
So thank you for sharing that, Kathy. And
thank you, Sheila.
Thank you so much, really. This is so great. And I am very, very honored to be able to interview you. Thank you so much for your time.